The corridor outside the bridal suite smelled faintly of perfume and steamed fabric. I paused with the silver gift box pressed against my chest, steadying my breath before knocking. Inside, laughter floated bridesmaids, champagne glasses, clinking. When I opened the door, Tessa turned toward me, her white rehearsal dress catching the light. She smiled, all teeth, no warmth. "I brought you something," I said, stepping in carefully. My voice sounded smaller than I intended. I had wrapped the box in soft paper and tied it with a ribbon, the way my mother used to. Tessa reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the box, but instead of opening it, she leaned in her lips, almost at my ear. "After tomorrow," she whispered, her voice smooth as glass, "you're no longer family." For a moment, everything stilled. The music in the background, the chatter of her friends, it all became a hum behind my heartbeat. I didn't flinch. My fingers tightened on the ribbon, and I felt something shift low in my stomach, a quiet hardening I hadn't known was there. She straightened, twirled once the hem of her dress fanning out. It was my vintage gown, the one I had stored for decades, thinking of a daughter or daughter-in-law who might treasure it. The pearl necklace around her throat caught the overhead light. My mother's necklace, a gift I had handed over just last week. "Does it fit?" I asked, though. My throat felt dry. "It's perfect," she said brightly to the room, as if nothing had been whispered. "Absolutely perfect." I set the box down on a chair. Inside was an album I'd spent months assembling: Gabriel's first steps, his first soccer game, his law school graduation. Every page a story of us. My hands shook slightly as I pulled back. "Enjoy your evening," I murmured. Then I stepped out into the hallway, closing the door. On the laughter, on the dress, on the pearls, on the whispered sentence, still burning in my ear. By the time I reached the elevator, I knew I would not be the same woman walking into tomorrow. I used to think being invisible would come with age, that it would arrive softly, like a thinning mist, not a slammed door. But this wasn't age. This was erasure. Intentional, deliberate. It started with the guest list. Gabriel said they were keeping it small, intimate. I understood. Until I saw the RSVP tracker and noticed my cousin Diane, who raised him like her own after the divorce, wasn't invited. When I asked, he looked uncomfortable and said Tessa wanted to keep things tidy. Then came the ceremony rolls. I wasn't expecting to walk him down the aisle, but I thought I might light a candle, say a reading. Something. Anything. Instead, the officiant emailed me a draft of the schedule, and my name wasn't on it. I scrolled up and down as if it had fallen between the lines. I wrote a speech anyway, a short one. Warm. Honest. I sent it to Gabriel the week before, just in case. He didn't respond. I found out later from a bridesmaid that Tessa thought it would be emotionally confusing to include a mother's speech, especially when her own mother had passed. So her stepmother would speak. And I would sit. I swallowed that too. The photographer's call sheet arrived in a group message. I opened the PDF, scanning for my name. Groom plus bride plus groom's father. No mention of me. Not in the immediate family portraits, but Tessa's stepmother was listed. Twice. I sat there with that file open on my screen and tried to convince myself it was an oversight, a formatting error, a mistake, but it wasn't. I had paid for half the venue, quietly, not for recognition, just to help. But I watched as Tessa toasted her father and stepmother for their incredible generosity. I lifted my glass anyway. I smiled. Because if you make a scene, they call you bitter. If you disappear, they don't even notice. I thought of that as I packed up the extra photos for the album she never opened. I had given them everything they wanted, and they hadn't even needed to ask. The pearls had been my mother's, passed down to me on the morning of my wedding, with trembling hands and eyes full of pride. I kept them wrapped in velvet for decades, waiting for the moment I'd give them to someone who would carry our name, our story. Tessa cried when I handed them over, said they were exquisite, and asked if she could wear them for the rehearsal dinner too, not just the ceremony. I nodded, heart full. The dress came next. I had preserved it, carefully hand-stitched seams, a high collar that once made me feel like royalty. Tessa tried it on in my guest room, spun in front of the mirror, and gasped like she couldn't believe her luck. "It's vintage," she said, eyes shining. "It's perfect." I added a handwritten note to the box, a blessing, a few words about marriage and what it means to build a home from love, not performance. She never mentioned it. 2 days later, I overheard the planner talking with one of Tessa's cousins, the groom's mom. "Oh, I think she's seated with extended family row D or something. The main table's just immediate relatives. Row D, behind college friends and second cousins." I asked to confirm. The planner looked uncomfortable and said, "Oh, Tessa made a few adjustments to make the tables flow better." So I checked the final seating chart. My name was there barely, like a footnote in the margins. Then came the photographer. She was lovely, warm, but she pulled me aside quietly and said, "Just so you know, the bride's asked to limit the portraits to nuclear family only. I wanted to give you a heads up." I stood there in my best dress, in the gown I once wore, watching Tessa laugh with her friends, my pearls catching the light, my dress swirling around her legs. My seat moved back. 4 rows. They didn't want me in the picture, just the pieces of me that looked good on paper. Back home, the house felt heavier than usual, like it was holding its breath with me. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged in to complete a catering payment Gabriel had asked me to handle weeks ago. Just as the confirmation screen loaded, a new email arrived. No subject, no sender name. At first I thought it was spam. But the body of the email was blank, except for 2 attachments and 1 line. "You deserve to know who she really belongs to." My hands hesitated before clicking. The first file opened to a grainy photo, an official-looking document. I leaned closer. It was a marriage license. Legal, stamped, dated 6 years ago. Tessa Vaughn and Dalton Vaughn. Not exes, not separated, not pending. No dissolution on record. I opened the second attachment. A scanned contract, sharp and legible. Vaughn Joint Asset Agreement. Paragraph after paragraph of financial language I'd learned to read over decades of working with vendor contracts and community grants. But this wasn't business. This was a trap. The agreement outlined shared asset consolidation beneficiary terms and transfer schedules spelled out clearly. Gabriel's name was listed as the funding source, Dalton Vaughn's as the secondary signer. Tessa's name was embedded throughout, not as a spouse-to-be, but as someone working to funnel funds across trust lines. I pushed the laptop back and sat perfectly still. This wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. And Gabriel, my son, had no idea. I didn't know who sent the email. And in that moment, I didn't care. They'd given me what I needed, truth in black and white. Then I closed the laptop and rested my hand on top of it. Heart pounding, not in fear, but in clarity. My hand stayed on the lid for a long moment before I reached for my phone and dialed the only person I trusted to read legal language without blinking, my old friend from the courthouse, retired, but still sharp. Some truths don't need confrontation. They just need a witness willing to act. Clara answered on the first ring. "Is this about the wedding?" she asked already, reading the edge in my voice. "Not exactly," I said. "I need you to look at something. I'll send it now." Minutes later, we were both staring at the same document side by side on the phone, like we had been years ago. Me editing policy drafts, her reviewing case filings. I walked her through the joint asset agreement, the transfers, the signature lines. She didn't say a word until she reached the last page. "Dalton Vaughn," she finally said. The boss? Yes. She sighed. This isn't just a financial agreement, it's protection for him. Everything here secures Dalton's stake. Your son's just the funding source. I stared at the ceiling heat rising in my chest. I want to find out something else, I said. Can you check if she's divorced? Clara called me back 20 minutes later. She's not, she said flatly. Tessa Vaughn is still legally married. To Dalton Vaughn, filed 6 years ago. No dissolution on record. My fingers curled against the edge of the table. I thought of that dress of the pearls of her laughing in my house. I thought of Gabriel saying, "She's different with me, Mom. You'll see." I clicked to open one more file Gabriel had uploaded weeks ago, what I had thought was just a formality. His prenup. Signed, notarized, locked in. It gave Tessa access to shared assets through a family trust. I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I just opened a blank folder and titled it, "For Gabriel." I saved everything inside. PDFs, screenshots, scans of marriage records. I made a list of every transaction. Then I closed the laptop and sat there watching the sun slide across the tile floor like nothing had changed. But everything had, and now I knew what had to come next. I sat at my desk long after the house had gone dark, the only light coming from the soft glow of the lamp and the white page in front of me. The pen hovered over the paper for a long time before I started writing. Not a plea. Not an argument. Just the truth. I kept it simple. I didn't write a plea. Just gathered what he needed to see. The joint asset agreement. The hidden transfers. The shared trust with Tessa's name embedded in every line. The marriage certificate clear as day that showed she had never ended her first marriage to Dalton Vaughn. No accusations. Just facts. Then I printed everything, copies of contracts, notarized documents, screenshots, bank records. I organized it all neatly into a folder and slid it into a thick envelope. I didn't trust email. In the morning, I called Clara. She answered like she'd been waiting. "I need you to deliver something I said." Directly to him. Not to the coordinator. Not to the hotel desk. To Gabriel. Where and when? The church, I said. 30 minutes before the ceremony. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. After we hung up, I opened my closet and looked at the dress I'd planned to wear. The one I'd spent too much on because I thought, maybe it would matter to look beautiful standing beside my son. I took it off. The hanger zipped it back into the garment bag and pushed it to the back of the closet. I wouldn't be going. This wasn't my fight anymore. I had raised him with eyes and ears and a mind sharp enough to see what needed to be seen. If he chose not to open the envelope, that would be his decision. But at least I would know. When it all came crashing down, I had given him the truth. That morning, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat by the window. The clock ticked quietly, and somewhere across town, the envelope changed hands. I didn't look at the time. I didn't check social media. I just sat by the window with my coffee cooling in my hands and the quiet hum of the street moving on without me. But across town, I knew exactly how it was supposed to unfold. The church white columns and glass doors filled row by row with guests. Strings playing softly. People whispering, smiling. Cameras flashing. One chair near the front mine remained empty. Clara arrived just before the processional. She wore a deep gray coat, walked quickly down the side aisle, and found Gabriel in the groom's room. She handed him the envelope without a word. He recognized her. He knew better than to ask why. He opened it. No one saw what was inside, but they saw him stop, saw his body lean against the back of the chair like the air had been knocked out of him. He didn't speak, just stood still, holding the papers, and walked toward the vestibule. The string quartet finished their last warm-up note. The officiant glanced toward the side door, waiting for a signal. It never came. Instead, the music faded. A soft murmur passed through the pews. Then the officiant stepped forward. His voice didn't project. He simply said, "The ceremony will not proceed as planned. We thank you for your presence." A wave of confusion swept through the room, then silence. Then behind the closed doors of the bridal suite, Tessa's scream. Not a cry of heartbreak. No, it was sharper. Fury. I didn't need to hear it to know. The envelope had done its job. I sat quietly on my porch, watching the breeze move the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a single car horn broke the stillness and then was gone. I took another sip of cold coffee, folded my hands in my lap, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be different. But first, everything had to fall. By Monday morning, the photos were everywhere. A bridesmaid, probably someone looking for her own piece of attention, had leaked a photo of the sealed envelope in Gabriel's hand. The canceled program crumpled on the table beside him, and Tessa, mid-scream, her mascara streaked down her cheek. At first, people speculated. Cold feet. Family drama. Someone joked online that I'd faked an illness for attention. I didn't respond. But then, a local wedding blog posted a story titled, "The Bride, the Boss, and the Real Contract." They had obtained a scanned copy of the asset agreement. Not from me. I had never shared it, but someone had. Dalton Vaughn issued a public statement through his firm. Something rehearsed and legal sounding. Allegations of impropriety, confidential business arrangements, mutual respect. But the records contradicted him. The marriage license, the shared bank activity, the timeline. Investors started pulling from Tessa's startup. One by one, then all at once. A woman who had built her image on authenticity and fierce loyalty was now trending for betrayal and deception. Gabriel went dark. No social posts, no press, just silence. And me, I went to the farmer's market. I bought fresh flowers and a bag of Honeycrisp apples. A neighbor asked me if I was holding up okay. I smiled and said I was fine. People began calling, messaging, wanting to know more. Reporters, extended relatives, strangers with theories. I didn't say a word. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. Silence, when chosen, has weight. It tells them I saw everything, understood it all, and walked away still standing. They had tried to cut me out of the story, but now, without lifting a finger, I was the only part left that hadn't collapsed. That night, I found myself folding linens from the guest room and thinking strangely about Gabriel. Not what he'd said or hadn't, but how he must be living with the echo of it all now. I didn't expect an apology, but I had left the porch light on. I heard the knock before I saw him. Just one. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Then the door creaked open on its own. I didn't move right away. I knew that kind of knock. It wasn't asking permission. It was announcing presence like it used to when he'd come home from college, exhausted and hungry and needing nothing but space. Gabriel stood in the hallway for a second, his jacket still damp from the outside. Then he walked into the kitchen and sat down at the old table like he'd never left. I didn't ask why he was here. He didn't say anything. I filled the kettle, pulled down 2 mugs, reached for the ground beans. I knew he preferred strong black, no sugar. When I set the cup in front of him, he looked up. Just briefly, then back down. He wrapped both hands around the mug like he needed to hold on to something solid. He didn't drink right away. I sat across from him, but didn't fill the air. He looked older somehow. Not in his face, but in the way his shoulders rounded forward, like the past week had knocked something out of him that words couldn't fix. After a while, he took a sip. He winced. Too hot. He held it anyway. Still no apology. No explanation. Just a man sitting in the ruins of what almost was. And yet I didn't need either. I had carried him through worse. Held his fevered body as a child listened through heartbreaks and failures. This was no different. Just another storm he didn't yet know how to name. He glanced up again, met my eyes for a second, then looked away. That was enough. When he reached for the sugar out of habit, I slid it toward him before he asked. We stayed like that for a long time, not speaking the silence between us, not cold, but steady. Outside, the light was starting to fade. I reached for the notepad near the stove and jotted down the name of a paint color I'd been considering. Something soft, something new. The first room I repainted was the guest bedroom. The walls had been the same pale yellow since Gabriel was a boy. I chose a soft gray this time. Cool, clean, quiet. I moved slowly, room by room. Not to distract myself, not to forget, just to reclaim. In the mornings, I walked to the community center, where I'd signed up for a writing class. Twice a week, we sat in a circle of folding chairs and read paragraphs aloud. Some people wrote poems. Others wrote letters they'd never send. I wrote about silence, about the power of what isn't said. Weeks passed. The air turned lighter. And then one evening, as I was folding fresh linens in the hallway, I heard the door open. No knock this time. Just the creak of wood, the sound of familiarity. Gabriel stood there with a cardboard box in his arms. He looked better. Tired, but clearer. He didn't offer a speech. Just stepped into the kitchen, placed the box gently on the table, and said, "These belong with you." I opened the lid. The pearl necklace nestled in its velvet pouch, the dress carefully folded. And on top a note in his handwriting, "I understand now." I nodded, said nothing. I poured 2 mugs of coffee, the same way I always had. Black, no sugar. He added a little milk this time quietly. I smiled, just barely. We sat for a long while in silence. Not the kind that aches, but the kind that holds. A steady silence, a shared one. When he left, he kissed the top of my head. It had been years since he'd done that. That night, I pulled out my leather-bound journal, the one I'd been afraid to ruin with anything personal. I opened to the first page, uncapped the pen, and wrote, "They tried to cut me out, but I still own the ending." I closed the cover gently. My name was still mine, and now it stayed.